As usual, welcome to the From a Writer's Perspective podcast, in which we will dissect the stories that influence us, analyze how they're created, and explore more about the writers behind them, especially this episode. Now, I am Kieran Storms, and with me is my dear friend and aspiring writer, Leonard. Brandon Sanderson is notorious for writing in a different pace than other writers. And with the pandemic, he might have hit his highest point and pushed out 5 extra novels in the last 2 years. So the press release link to this was, in my opinion, a brilliant way to promote these books, and the Kickstarter has already pushed tons of his fans to pre-order these extra novels. I believe at the time he's now hit 21 million in backing. And with this episode, what we will try to investigate is how he did this. And I, for one, would love to adopt some ways to become more productive as well. So, Leonard, this episode to me feels like a juxtaposition to the George R. R. Martin episode. Sanderson is definitely not a gardener, he's more of an architect and pushes out more books in 2 years than George R. R. Martin has published in the Game of Thrones series. And he's very open about this process, and he's very careful at which projects he approaches outside of writing. So that makes it a very interesting episode for me, because we already learned a lot from that first episode. But before we dive into this, what was your actual reaction to the live stream that Sanderson pushed out?
What was my first reaction? It was anger, resentment, jealousy. What more? Sadness. I don't know. It's an amazing accomplishment. I can only applaud him for what he's done. I wish I could do the same.
I can only say that it's remarkable that while we're all kind of like figuring out what to do with this pandemic situation, even 2 years in, this man just instantly went to like, hey, what makes me relax? Oh, writing. Oh yeah, let me write. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, well, writing relaxes me as well, but I have a 9-to-5 job to do. So
yeah.
Let's make one thing clear. I would not be able to push out 5 stories in 2 years. At this point, I'm writing short stories, but I think if I would not have a 9-to-5 job and I could do full-time writing, well, I might be able to push out a novel in a year. That's hard to say because, yeah, that's not the situation.
Well, I would say that I think you're definitely the fastest writer of the two of us. One thing I found interesting that he once said is that once he finished his first novel, his process of 6 years of working on a novel was cut down to basically 6 months. I think the confidence that comes with having your first novel out, and then maybe also just having publishers behind you and an agent, mm-hmm. I think you would be in a very different position, thus being able to do very different things that you would normally be able to do. So I do think that we hold that into account, that those things will make certain parts of your life and not having the 9-to-5 a lot easier.
And 3 or 4 of his stories, he already had the universe set, and he didn't have to make new things up, or at mm-hmm. least he didn't have to redefine or define a magic system or a society. It's 3 of the books are set in the Cosmere universe, and mm-hmm. one of them is something completely different, and book 5 we know not much about. But that helps as well to be more productive, I think. I think the most of the time is going to be researching, defining the laws of your world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those sort of things.
I think when we were on the phone yesterday as well, we talked about this a lot. Like, the more established your universe and the rules inside it are, the less you have to think about, would this person do this? Would this be possible? Mm-hmm. You know, these seem like little things, but if they come up a lot, they can be minutes to hours too. It's even like editing these episodes. You know, sometimes we have a track of an hour, and then all of a sudden the end product is 40 minutes because you take out spaces. And it's the same with, I think, books. Like, he even says it in the third draft, he tends to cut out 10%, mm-hmm. And in between, like, rewrites things, looks at character motivations and everything and whether they work. So I think also just having the space and time to also cut where necessary and know what to do, and also knowing the rules. Those are things that just help you be faster with creating the actual story.
But I wonder if the thing when I'm starting my edit, of course I'm cutting things, but I'm also adding new things because you just have a new idea, and maybe that's also why I don't write that fast. But then suddenly I get this idea and just want to put it in somewhere. But I wonder if he does it, or that it's just, okay, he writes the maximal amount of words and then cuts it down.
From what I could find, looking into, because he has a lot of articles that he's written himself on his website that kind of explain his process. So his first draft is a very crude sculpture, as he says it. And that has like basic arcs, characters, you can see the overall plot, but it isn't until the second draft that major issues and character personalities get resolved. Basically lets the characters he writes audition for him. So he gives them a personality, looks at whether it works and whether these motivations work. And in the second draft, he might change those. He might even pop in an extra character because he feels like the story needs this little extra element, this extra friction. And in his second draft, he also finalizes the feel, the look, the actual work. And then the third draft, which is where beta readers come in, that's where he tends to cut to 10%. Where he tries to focus on language, where he tries to focus on making everything as readable and as perfect as possible before it goes to the editors. And then the fourth, fifth, and sixth drafts, they are for the editors to give him feedback and guide him to the end result. So it's very deliberate where in which moment what happens. So for his first draft, he even says, and this is what he said in his video about writer's block.
Actually approaching it. And if I write it wrong, if I sit down and I write that scene the way I was planning it, knowing it's not going to work, and then I give it a day, the next day, by then my brain has been like, you know what you did wrong. It's the wrong viewpoint. If you just swap to this other viewpoint and show this from that character's eyes, that whole scene will just pop and work. Maybe I should say 8 out of 10 times it works that way, and 1 out of 10 times it was just okay anyway. Right? I was just in a funk. Once in a while, I do that and it's still wrong and my brain doesn't know how to fix it. That's when I know that there is some sort of deeper problem.
But I wonder, when he has this sort of writer's block, is the thing he's stuck on, is it the language he's looking for or the situation?
I think what works well for him is he knows really well what's happening when it doesn't work. And that's why he's separated certain parts of the process. So apparently, his third draft is about perfecting the language, and his second draft is really about making the feel and the look and the interactions between characters work, and the first is the basic arcs and characters and the overall plot. So I can only imagine that if that is the way that he writes his book, then if he has a writer's block, it usually happens only in the first draft, because that's connected to overall plot, and writer's blocks usually happen when you have character arcs or plot that doesn't work, or how do I write it down? And I think he just puts it on the page in the first draft, then looks at what happens with interpersonal stuff in the second draft. It will not be a linguistic or grammar thing, or even like prose, because I think he does those things in a third draft.
The thing I'm struggling with sometimes is, you create this situation and you can't get past. There is no way you can rationally just find a solution for, okay, this is the problem I'm stuck with. How do I get past this? And those are usually the writer's blocks that I have.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have to go back to change something to not have the situation you earlier created. But then you have to change the whole story. So and then you get into the process of editing. So that's why I'm wondering. Yeah, he probably is an architect with a big outline.
And I can tell you what he is, because even that that's the beauty of Brandon Sanderson, is that I think that he is one of the most generous writers of our day and age. He shares everything on his blog, everything on his YouTube. He
seems like an agreeable guy.
I think there's just something likable about him. There's something he just breathes passion. I think that's a quality, a trait that a lot of people like. Anyway, so yeah, he's definitely like, he even because he alludes to the whole George R. R. Martin thing and how he words it as architect and a gardener. And what he says is, I'm usually an architect. I found that the best way to get the kind of endings I like. I have to know where I'm going before I start. But that said, an outline has to be a living thing of its own. I need the flexibility to knock out an entire section of it and rebuild them. I do that frequently. I have to be able to respond to what I'm passionate about in the world, as you mentioned. In the Stormlight books, the interludes were more reactionary, and I built them into the story to allow myself more freedom to explore the world in a gardener sort of way, while the plot itself was quite well set out. So that I think that this is one thing that we will find comes back a lot, is that he knows the rules that work for him, but he's not as binary as I'm either an architect or a gardener. He uses the foundation of an architect, and he gets to be a gardener in between. He studied English literature, and he knows the rules, and he even has the laws of magic. But he has these 3 laws. An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. Weakness, limits, and costs are more interesting than powers. And the author should expand on what is already a part of the magic system before adding entirely new things. And then he also has a 4th kind of like the law 0, always err on the side of what is awesome. So he has these strict 3 laws, but then because he knows these laws, he knows where to break them. Kind of. And I guess that's always the thing. Like, even he is an architect, but he allows himself to be a gardener, which I think is a skill that I at least still have to learn to kind of open up and free. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I'm definitely a gardener, and I don't use an outline, but just know where to begin and where the end is, and in between I just freehand my stuff, and yeah, then at some point you can create a situation where you can't get out of.
Yeah, and I think that is also a thing what we talked about before, the knowing how far you need to go to be able to write as outline wise, whether you need it or not. I think it's something that is, some things are just rules that will work for most writers but won't work for all writers. And if you're the writer that sees no benefits and see only restrictions in creating outline, then definitely don't do it. But this is something Sanderson definitely does, and he creates space to move around inside that outline. So that's something that he definitely does. I for one think that I would definitely have a lot to learn in creating that space within an outline to make it less rigid, because like you used to mention, I think in a previous episode as well, my outlines are basically almost short stories. I know I've heard from Brandon Sanderson episode as well that he said that some writers, even like every line is a chapter and every paragraph is basically a whole story arc. There are writers that do that, and they can be very successful at it.
Yeah, but I think it's also personality. I think Brandon Sanderson, if you look at his videos and see, he's very consistent. He's very disciplined. even when he does his podcast, he's signing books. So he knows. He just really knows how to manage his time. That's something that's really admirable.
Yes. I think that's also one of the things that the thing that you're striking right now. I think that's the biggest thing, probably consistency. Because everything that we're talking about, from having a way of working around drafts and what one draft does, that's consistency. Knowing the rules and knowing when to break them, that's consistency. Having laws of magic, that's all consistency. Even the way when he writes, he's mentioned that he usually wakes up at like noon or 1 p.m. And then he has a pocket of writing time between that and 5 o'clock. And then he spends time with his family. And then afterwards, he spends a little time maybe gaming for 2 hours. And then he goes back to writing at, I think, like 10-ish, something like that. And then he gets to write until, I don't know, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., something like that. So he has 2 shifts. And he has this deal with his wife that if there's someone that wants to interrupt that time that he's created for that, she will guard that time for him. Which I think, and in that, the trade goes both ways, that between at 5 to 10 p.m., he's there for his family and his mind doesn't even go to writing. Mm-hmm. So I think that is also, it's something that if we've looked at George R. R. Martin, he's less protective of his time in that sense, especially with looking at The Elder Ring just coming out. And if we look at, a lot of people do see a lot of work from George R. R. Martin in that, then you know that there's been a lot of involvement. That's great, but that takes away of the time to work on Winds of Winter, for instance.
Yeah, like I said, it's really admirable how he manages time, and also looking at my own process, when he goes gaming, he games for 2 hours. When I go gaming, I go gaming for a full day. But that's also, and like I said, I think that's personality, because when I start something, I want to finish something. So I cannot pick up a game and then just leave it. Well, it depends on the game. But if you, for example, play a story-driven game, God of War, for example, or you cannot just halfway through the game just cut it off and continue with your life. No, I want to finish it, because when it's finished, I can start on the next project.
You have this with writing as well, that when you start writing, you want to finish, you want to go that extra mile as well.
Yeah, definitely. But also when I'm reading a book, I want to finish it before I start writing again. I cannot read and then after that start writing. No, I just I don't know, everything I start just has to finish, and that's just how it calms my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that that's not a bad thing at all. I think that what we're also looking at in this episode is that this works for Brandon Sanderson, and I think that in general, this is one writer, and there's also Stephen King that works very consistently. But I think in general, writers, because they're creative people, and I've met a lot of creative people, we're not necessarily the best in strict patterns and routines. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of inspiration also comes from the unexpected. So I think that a little bit of maneuverability is very, very welcome for a lot of creative people. That's being said, if we look at the most effective creatives, not the most genius creatives, the most effective creatives, we see that they usually do tend to treat it as work and does have like a shift, do have consistency. And I can even say for myself, I've once had a moment in my life where I had a schedule when I woke up, when I brushed my teeth, when I did like everything, and I had routines, and this was when I was writing. When I played Final Fantasy, I would play it 2 hours and then I would put it down, and I did that strictly. And I would get annoyed with like still having these like minutes that turned into 10 minutes that, but I had that structure. And I do have to say that the effectiveness of how many pages and how many words you can churn out, it's there. There's proof that if you really map these things, you become more effective with words getting on the paper. And I think that if you even then have like a rule for yourself of, hey, this is the first draft, we do not edit during the first draft, and we'll worry about making it very fanciful later. If you trust in the process, and that's the thing, in the end will bring forth a beautiful book. But you will need to enjoy that experience. And that's the thing. The book might be beautiful, but you might not enjoy the whole writing process then.
Yeah, one thing I want to add, what can help your productivity is just pull out the internet cable. When I'm writing, I have I have my Word file on one screen, and on the other one there's a YouTube video. And yeah, before you know it, you're just watching YouTube videos or other videos. That's what distracts me most of the time. And I know I should just be able to, or I should just pull out the plug. But then I'm like, yeah, but what if I can't find a word? I need to have Google by my side just to find the right word I'm looking for. Whilst that's just a lie. But
I really want to make it very important for everyone out there, because I know, because I'm part of a company that is specializes in this, and I can see how they do this. You don't need Instagram on, you don't need Facebook on, you don't need YouTube on, you don't need Google on. If you want music, download it. But yes, plug out that internet cable. Because honestly, you don't need a thesaurus to write the plot and the character arcs and everything. I don't think you do. You don't need as much inspiration as you think you do. And I am not saying this out of me applying this. I am just as much a sucker for this. I am the one that will probably look at the most. I might hold a world record for amount of YouTube videos clicked on in an hour. I might. So I'm at the most flawed, but I know how it happens, and knowing doesn't mean you can change your behavior.
Just it's this mental dependency on it, and I know it's kind of addictive behavior.
Yes, definitely. And it pulls at you as if it's some sort of instinct, like a voice saying, hey, you kind of need to find a cool word. Shall we go on Google because you suck and you don't know those words? You need to feel a little bit more secure about your own writing. Mm-hmm. And this sounds stupid that you need to, but, we should all just be a little bit more confident. Because without that confidence, you're not going to get there either way.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice closing message.
Definitely. Yeah, I think... Still an incredible accomplishment. I don't think a lot of people will be able to ever do this. And I don't think you need to, with a 9-to-5, to be pushing 4 or 5 novels. But we can all be a little bit faster thanks to these lessons, I guess.
Yeah. And while the people are waiting for Brandon Sanderson's novel, I just want to do some shameless self-promotion.
Oh, yes. But if you wouldn't have done it, I would have pushed you to say something, because it looks really cool as well, by the way.
Yeah, because I also had a tiny accomplishment. I published my first short novel. Self-published it. There was no one interested. I just had some great feedback from editors of magazines. And they were like, wow, I really like this evocative imagery and
great prose, they said.
Great prose, yeah. But it's just not our tone of voice that we're interested in. But so yeah, that gave me the confidence to just publish it on my own website, and you can find it on talesofestis.com.
The first short story is out now.
Yeah, if you're interested, you can read it. It's free, it costs you nothing, just a little bit of time. And if you don't like it, you can just close the page and continue with your life.
There's also a beautiful map included in it that you've drawn yourself.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Of course. No, but I obviously I've read it multiple times now. I think that this version of the short story, I think that this is also something that Daniel Green has talked about as well, about self-publishing, and it's a great opportunity for a lot of writers, but you do need to put that extra work into the end part of the process as well, with editing and checking if the words are right and everything. The fourth, fifth, and sixth drafts that Sanderson goes through. I think you've taken that time. You've taken the time to taken a lot of time to make sure the words are right and the grammar and the prose is right. It's a great feat.
And credits where credits due. Thank you for helping me with the translation.
Oh, of course. No, I would love to be part of it. For me, it's been a very enjoyable process to be someone's beta reader. That's some advice that I would definitely say. Like, have someone close to you that you trust, and have like beta readers around you. Make a writers group. Like, have a little community of yourself, like a mini community, and give and take. be able to do both. That's it's a very important thing. Okay, so that was the episode, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
I guess. You can follow us on all the other platforms, and we're also on YouTube for little shorts and little segments from our show that we edit in a very nice way, I think. So thank you for listening, and this was From a Writer's Perspective.